Deathstroke is a master assassin who was trained by the military and experimented on to get superpowers. And though the military thought the experiment was a failure and discharged him, it turned out that the powers just took a while to kick in. So now Deathstroke has an amazing healing factor, although he can't seem to regrow his eye, so it is limited in some respects. Now, as I said, Deathstroke is an assassin for hire, so we all know that he kills people, and given how successful a hitman he is, we all know that he has killed a lot of people. He's even killed superheroes, such as the Atom. He killed Adam Choi and then delivered his corpse in a matchbox. So it's a given that he's done some pretty messed up stuff. But this video is going to go over the 5 worst things that he has ever done. Excluding mass murder, of course, since that one's kind of obvious. He slept with an underage girl. Now, Deathstroke has used Tara Markov to infiltrate the Teen Titans group in many different continuities, such as the classic Teen Titans TV show. But that version is intended to be seen by children, so it was a bit more wholesome. But in the original comic book version, he actually slept with Tara on several occasions, which, considering she is only 15 years old in the comic, is a very serious crime. Now, admittedly, she did consent, but since she is underage and legally can't consent, it still counts as rape. However, this does only seem to be the case in the comics. In all the adaptions, they're not actually sleeping together. In fact, in the Teen Titans Judas contract, not only is her age never made clear, but it also comes across that although she wants to be his lover, he doesn't really want to be with her. He's just using her to get to the Titans. So hopefully the two of them kept it professional in the film. But they certainly didn't in the comic book, which means Deathstroke is a sex offender and a statutory rapist. Although I probably should say, in recent years they have tried to retcon this a bit to make out that the two of them weren't an item, which I personally think is a better way of telling the story, but originally they were lovers. Pretty much everything to do with the Teen Titans. Deathstroke has always hated the Teen Titans. In some versions it's because he blames them for his son's death. Of course, that's not actually true. In fact, Deathstroke's poor parenting is the real problem, and he's usually actually the cause of his son's death, both directly and indirectly. But Deathstroke has taken this out on the Titans, and he's done a lot of things to them. He's captured Damian Wayne and tried to drown him. Damian Wayne did of course escape, but he did try to end him. He kidnapped and tortured the Wally West Flash. Then he lied and manipulated Kid Flash so he could steal his Speed Force powers, which he was never going to return. They managed to get the powers back, of course, but along the way, Wally West's heart was permanently damaged, which Deathstroke is also partly responsible for. Deathstroke also set off a bomb that blew Jason Todd off a building, and although Jason was fine physically, it really messed up his head, and he has some serious PTSD from it. He's also implanted the Teen Titans with nanobites that was slowly killing them from the inside, all in an attempt to manipulate Robin into being his apprentice, or else he'd kill the rest of the Titans. He also put a suit on Terra that took control of her body and made her and her earth-moving powers his slave. He's also kidnapped them all in the Judas contract and sold them to Brother Blood, who wanted to absorb their life force and their powers. And he has also continually lied, manipulated, and made the Titans' lives a living hell in a million different ways. Way too many for me to list here. But basically, every time Deathstroke has had an interaction with the Teen Titans, he does something truly horrific to them. And although I don't have time to go over them all, if you actually have a favourite thing he's done to the Teen Titans over the years, then please feel free to put it in the comments. He drove his daughter insane. In the comic books, when his daughter Rose discovered that Deathstroke was her father, he took her in and trained her as his apprentice. And he also gave her the same serums that gave him his powers. Of course, he didn't mention the fact that these drugs were essentially mind control drugs that would make Rose do whatever he wanted, and send her pretty much bat-poop crazy. So crazy that when he said she wasn't the same as him, she stabbed her own eye out just to prove to him that they really were alike. Now, we all seek to gain our parents' approval, but that one really does take it to a new height. And in the live-action Titans show, Deathstroke was actually the one who cut out Rose's eye. All part of selling some story that they were enemies so that she could infiltrate the Titans for Deathstroke. I mean, who cuts out their kid's eye just so they can get a job done? It's crazy. But getting back to the comics, Rose Wilson eventually managed to leave Deathstroke and get the drugs out of her system, and was actually acquitted of all the crimes she committed by a court, because the judge felt that all the drugs and manipulations of her father proved that she wasn't in her right mind when she committed the crimes. and she actually later joined the Teen Titans for a while. Now, Rose isn't the only one he has ever drugged so that he can control them. In fact, he later did the same with the Cassandra Cain version of Batgirl, so he could use her to, once again, get at the Teen Titans. But since he was drugging, manipulating, and mind-controlling his own daughter, I'd say that's worse than just drugging some random stranger, although they're both pretty bad. And you also have to consider the fact that he was giving her so many drugs that he basically broke her mind, and even when she tore her own eye out, he didn't stop drugging her. And even when she later had a moment of clarity and saw what was happening, Deathstroke just drugged her again so he could keep on using her as his puppet. I mean, that is depraved and disgusting, and a betrayal of so many trusts as not only a father but also as a human being. And I know a lot of people view Deathstroke as an anti-hero, but when he's done things like this, I personally think that he can only be labelled as a villain. He got his son's throat slit. Early on in Deathstroke's mercenary career, he had a family, and the criminal group Hive abduct his son and are going to kill him if Deathstroke doesn't join their group and do what they tell him to. Now, Deathstroke just flat out refuses out of a code of personal honour because he doesn't want to be controlled by them, and so they end up slitting his son's throat. Now, he could have cooperated and maybe his child would have been fine, but the problem here is he didn't even try. He just sacrificed his son, which clearly shows where his priorities are. And you might think it's not Deathstroke's fault, it's instead the people who actually held the knife to the boy's throat and slit it. And you would of course be right, it is their fault. But you have to take into account the fact that Deathstroke was lying to his family about being a mercenary. He said he wasn't a mercenary, that he was a businessman. Had they known that he was a murderer for hire with very powerful enemies, then maybe the family would have taken better steps to protect themselves instead of being caught unawares, which they were, which was why it was so easy to kidnap his son. But it's not so much the situation, but the fact that Deathstroke doesn't really do anything to get his son safe. He just flat out attacks the bad guys. I mean, if he tried to play along, he could have at least got the poor boy away from them before attacking them. He could have just pretended, yeah, I'll join your group, and then made a plan to get his son safe. I mean, Deathstroke is a master manipulator, we've seen that countless times. But no, he just gets his son's throat slit instead. Although I do have to say that the boy did survive, though he was unable to ever speak again as his vocal cords had been cut. He helped bring about the apocalypse. In the animated Teen Titans show, Slade dies, but not for long, as he is soon resurrected by Trigon, an all-powerful demon who wants to rule Earth and the rest of the universe, and he wants Slade to get things ready for him. So Trigon brings Slade back to life and gives him some magical powers, and then he sets him the task of getting the world ready, and getting Trigon's daughter, Raven, ready as well, as she is the key to Trigon's return. So Slade goes out and uses his powers to do what he's supposed to, and Trigon returns. He transforms the Earth into a fiery abyss, and every single person on the planet, except for the Teen Titans, is turned to stone. Now, the reason Slade agreed to doing all this was because Trigon only partly brought him back to life, and he's going to finish the job by giving him his flesh and blood once the deal is done. But Trigon is a demon, and as we all know, demons don't keep their word. So he betrays Slade and refuses to pay him. So Slade tries to kill Trigon, and fails because, as I mentioned, Trigon's pretty much all powerful. So Trigon takes away his powers and tries to kill him. Though Slade does manage to survive, and he does manage to get his reward his own way, by convincing Robin they have to work together to save the world. Of course, he only helps Robin so he can get what he wants, but still, he did help fix things. Now Raven does eventually defeat her father, and the Titans save the world, bringing everyone back to life. But still, bringing about the apocalypse is a pretty messed up thing to do. And I know I said we weren't going to be including all of his murders in this video, but wiping out 7 billion humans? Well, that just has to be mentioned, because that's the worst mass murder in the history of the world. And those are the 5 worst things that Deathstroke has done, although I am sure that he'll do much worse things in the future. But what do you think of this list? Are these the worst things that Deathstroke has done? Or is there anything even more depraved that you know of that you think should have been mentioned instead? Be sure to let us know in the comments, and I'd just like to quickly remind everyone that we now have some merchandise available on our store, and to say thanks to all of you who have donated to the Needle Mouse Productions page on Patreon. And as always, thanks for watching, and feel free to subscribe, share, like, and comment.